Hey everybody, welcome back to another Infinity N5 initial reaction. This time we're taking a look at the Kestrel Colonial force, but before we jump into army, let's look at some context. So what defines KCF? KCF have got very strong gunfighting and close assault, with good MSV and marksman units, a fair few which have multiple wounds. Additionally, they've got some really fantastic albedo options as well, which looks to be becoming more important in N5. They've also got quite good close assault. They have some new close assault units as well as some holdovers like beast hunters, which means after putting the heads down, they can then run in and do some damage if given the opportunity. Where previously panosectorials could sometimes struggle not having this close assault, the design seems to be pushing more towards the panosectorials all having good hand-to-hand and close-range options, with KCF, military orders, and Svalheima all having good options to push into that deployment zone when the time's right. You've got very high-quality line troops, while the Fusiliers were already quite a good line troop by any standard. The Fennec Fusiliers take that a step further, having a lot of utility built in, as while keeping that strong stat line with the BS-12 and getting a little bit of BTS, which is fantastic. Additionally, KCF also has some more ablative defensive elements, which is now more so reserved for vanilla, with Shock Army and Varuna taking a step back. So the ablative elements with mine layers and hidden deployment units is sort of more now a KCF feature. In terms of weaknesses, the units have very little utility or expertise past their primary purpose. While it does mean that, for the most part, your profiles are quite lean, you have a piece that has a role, and it's not going to do much outside that role. Additionally, due to some factors we'll see later, such as Fireteam Master and the quality of your line troops, you do have fairly high troop slot pressure compared to other panosectorials. KCF and N4 did not exist. They're a brand new sectorial to Infinity N5, but they've taken lots of notes from the cut sectorials, mainly Shock Army. But if you look closely, you can see some elements from Varuna and Neoterra as well. Now that we've understood where we've come from, let's see where we're going. Alright, here we are in the army builder for Kestrel Colonial Force for Infinity N5. Kestrel gets unlimited duos, a Harris and a Core, which is fairly standard for Infinity N5 sectorials. The first team is the Fennec's Fireteam, where the Fennecs are your line troop, which will give you access to a Harris and a Core with them. It must include a Fennec, and has a good list of units you can include, including the Griffin, which is keyworded, and the Fennec keyword pops up again when we get towards the wild cards. You've got the Kestrel Fireteams, which can go in a duo or a Harris, and require any of one of a Griffin, Firefly, or Hetari. There is some more Kestrel tags in the wild cards as well, which we'll take a look at soon. The armored Fireteams are a duo only, and require one of either a Tikbalang or Squalos, and can include Maximus, a Firefly, or a Bulleteer. The Colcorp Fireteams can be duos or Harrises, require a Magistrate, and can include a Magistrate, Jackal, or Beast Hunter. Then we get to the wild cards, which include a Crux Knight, a Pathfinder Drone Bot, which is a pretty nice include, Papandra, who carries the Fennec and the Kestrel tag, Dr. Harper FTO, Quinn, who carries the Fennec and Kestrel tag, Sforza, and Emily. So let's take a look at the Fennec Fusiliers, who are pretty much all stars when it comes to line troops and the faction in general. You've got your basic 10-point combi rifle and combi rifle lieutenant, which is a nice viable lieutenant option. Although with the amount of utility you can get from some of these profiles, that might push you more towards something like a magistrate lieutenant, but we'll get to that soon. You've got a heavy machine gun and a missile launcher option, like most fusiliers, but you're probably leaning more towards some of your other options for your ARO and active guns rather than Fennecs themselves, where in other factions it's pretty popular to stick a Fusilier missile launcher up. I think you've probably got better options in KCF. The submachine gun light rocket launcher is okay, and 12 points is a great price point, but I think it's overshadowed somewhat by the Thunderbolt +1 burst shock mines for 2 extra points. For the 2 extra points, the Thunderbolt has the range bands of a Feuerbach, but the mine layer is what I'm really interested in. If you stick 2 of these guys in a link, you've got 2 fantastic backup guns, and that's 2 mines in your deployment zone, which is quite nice. Additionally, triangulated fire has been reworked, where it only takes a short skill now, but still imposes that -3. Fine in a pinch, I think I only used it maybe 2 or 3 times in N4, but now it's a lot less hard to engineer a situation where triangulated fire can actually be used. So it'll be interesting to see where that ends up in the mix. But I rate the Thunderbolt profile pretty highly, mostly for the mine layer, but the Thunderbolt +1 burst is a pretty fantastic gun. You have a comm link for reinforcements games. We're not really going to cover reinforcements in the initial reactions. Unfortunately, it wasn't really made part of the core game in N5, and still remains an optional extra. Now here's a little note from the Shock Army of Acontecimento. With the Hacker for 16 points and half a swick, you get a submachine gun, which is great for keeping points down, as well as a Fast Panda, which is really valuable. This is very similar to the Shock Army Hacker, where they had the combi rifle and grenade launcher, and the Fast Panda as well. The emitter is another weapon that's been reworked. It's essentially a Thunderbolt, burst to Feuerbach range bands, except with EM saves, which is a pretty fantastic tool in ARO, where you can stop an attack piece's run entirely with an emitter hit. And it's okay in active, but I would lean more towards that Thunderbolt. Still a fantastic backup gun for the price point. The main difference in the Fennec Fusilier stat line is that you lose a point of armor and gain the 3 BTS. With how good the Hacker is, I think this is a pretty good swap. And I think the Fast Panda giving you some network projection is absolutely fantastic. I could even see you running a couple of the Fennec Hackers solo to make use of coordinated orders to get them up, expand that network. Quite good stuff. Next is the Forward Observer and Sensor. Forward Observer profiles are usually not really utilized that much, as they don't tend to bring that much to the table. But what makes the Fennec Forward Observer special is the Disco Baller. The Disco Baller is a new piece of equipment that is shot similar to a mine dispenser, where it has double shot and a positive range band within 16. That puts out a small disco baller that emits an eclipse template. This is a really big step for Pano, having a piece of visibility control. At the end of the round, the disco baller shuts down, where the token is left on the table and the eclipse zone is taken away, but a successful roll with a deactivator can actually restart the disco baller. The sensor is also a pretty nice piece of kit. If you're taking a pure core or a core where you have quite a lot of these guys in it, the sensor is just a good piece of extra kit. Then we've got the paramedic, which is, it's nice to have. Bapandra has had a bit of a glow up, but I still think this paramedic is going to see a bit of play. Importantly, you can't really do the medkit +1 burst thing anymore with how the special die has worked out in N5, where before you could dart things pretty reasonably well, being able to shoot the 2 darts and statistically hope, even a Phys 10 model will make one of those saves. Now that gets discarded with the special die. Onto the BCA magistrates. They're quite an interesting piece. Biometric visor, counterintelligence, a new rule, Fireteam master in brackets jackals. So Fireteam master means that if it's linked with a model that has the name or keyword of the word in brackets, it turns those models regular as long as they're linked with it. Immunity, shock, and specialist operative. These guys are pretty attractive, not really from a gun fighting standpoint, even though they do have access to a multi-marksman, which is a pretty decent weapon. You're more looking at them as order generators and as quite good lieutenants. I'm very drawn to this 19-point Lieutenant Strategos level 1. Taking a BCA magistrate and chucking some jackals with it kind of reminds me of kind of a light alpha, where you've got the Strategos, you've got the counterintelligence, and you're sort of bringing in extra regular order if you have a jackal or 2 linked with you. I think these are probably your primary choice for a lieutenant in KCF if you aren't running something like a Tikbalang. I think it takes a bit of pressure off of your slots for the Fennec fusiliers, where you have a lot of profiles you'd like to take in a core. Additionally, they've got nanopulsars, they've got combi rifles, BS-12. They're not completely defenseless if someone pushes into your deployment zone. And the way Kestrel's set up defensively, someone pushing all the way through your deployment zone will probably be relatively difficult, especially because you'll have those linked jackals as well. I think the BCA magistrates are quite strong, and you're going to see them a lot. The jackals are also quite good models, but we'll get to them later. Next up, the Blink team, which is a really cool piece. They're BS-13 camo hidden deployment MIM-6 models with 3 profiles. A shock marksman, a multi-sniper, and a heavy rocket launcher with X-visor. The heavy rocket launcher -1 PS wild-powered assault pistol is probably the one I'd be leaning towards. You've got that surprise continuous template with the heavy rocket launcher. The -1 PS is also pretty nice, and the X-visor really softens those longer ranges where you can catch people out. The assault pistol is a fantastic piece of kit and helps them transition pretty naturally into active turn pieces who can get close and do some damage. And the wild power lets you set up pretty fantastic forks in active or reactive turn. The heavy rocket launcher, even though it's only burst 2, with mimetism -6 and BS-13 and a camo state, you can probably still make that work pretty decently in your active turn. Although it's risky, and you can be prone to failure just based off of being burst 2 in a 1 wound model, it does give them some viability in the active turn. I think with the shock marksman rifle, even though it's complementary with the assault pistol, you're not getting the reactive punch you want. And, look, maybe if it was a multi-marksman rifle, and on active as well, PS7, shock marksman burst 3, I don't know, it's just a bit too thin to draw me to it. The multi-sniper seems okay. I just think for less points, you're getting a lot more utility out of the heavy rocket launcher wild-powered assault pistol. I do think these are a pretty fantastic unit. KCF also has pretty good ways to obfuscate what tricks it's bringing. It has the Blink team, the Scarecrow, and the Black Air, all of which are very good and very viable hidden deployment or off-the-board pieces that all cost around 28 points. So it's not going to be obvious if you've got a missing troop slot what exactly that is. And if your opponent's expecting something like a Black Air, that can add a lot of cognitive load for them to worry about something that they might not need to and cause them to slip up to a blink team template. I really like the blink team, especially as a standalone unit where you've got a decent bit of pressure on your troop slots. I think they're quite good. Next, the drummers. People are pretty excited about them, and I can see why. Each drummer profile has a drummer with a marksman rifle, and then a drumbot who's usually equipped with a heavier piece of gear. The drumbots 1 to 4 all follow that pattern, with the outlier being the drummer forward observer. Looking at the drummers here, the drumbot number 1 with the multi-heavy machine gun for a 1 swick really draws me in as the best of the offensive pieces. The multi-heavy machine gun, and I should mention the drumbots are move 6-4, BS 13, and mimetism -3, making them a pretty strong gunfighter. It's also worthwhile noting that as a REM unit, they can be buffed with marksmanship from an Evo hacker. Marksmanship has taken a little bit of a hit from albedo, but if a unit has albedo -3, you're still neutral on it, where you're getting +3 from your marksmanship if you're in a good range, and a -3 from albedo. So unless it's albedo -6, you're not suffering too much. I think more where your pressure is that KCF isn't necessarily a faction with a ton of uses for an Evo hacker. I could see you taking an Evo hacker if maybe you're taking 2 drummers, and that could become worth it. But additionally, with Speedball needing to make a combat drop roll, having an Evo hacker to mess with that brings some additional value against Speedball, which from the games I've played, Speedball's been relatively powerful, so being able to disrupt that is going to be really nice. So the multi-heavy machine gun, it's only costing you a swick. You're still burst 4 with the multi-heavy machine gun, and you've got that explosive round on reactive. Also going on suppressive with something like that is quite strong too. The hyper-rapid magnetic cannon might catch some eyes as well, but at 1.5 swick, I think you'd be better off using that swick elsewhere and keeping that swick to 1, especially if you do want to take the Evo hacker. You've got a Feuerbach +1 burst as well, which, while inflicting a lot of saves, I think I'd rather stick with one of the multi-heavy machine gun or hyper-rapid magnetic cannon just to win that gunfight with burst 4. Burst 2 against burst 3 can get a little choppy sometimes, especially if they're a model with albedo or a visor or mimetism, which are all decently prevalent pieces of gear. I think the multi-heavy machine gun and hyper-rapid magnetic cannon are just going to be more reliable. Then you've got this very strange Mach 12 +1 burst and light rocket launcher profile with forward deployment 4. I don't see an incredible amount of utility in this one, especially where they're not a specialist and where the drumbot is hackable. Generally, I'm not a fan of forward deploying hackable models who can be touched by a forward deploying repeater or hacker fairly easily. And you're paying a decent amount of points for the drumbots. So having one bricked early would be pretty sad. The last one that's really worth mentioning is the drummer forward observer, where the drumbot is also a forward observer. While the drumbot only has a heavy flamethrower and a flash pulse on a whip 11, which isn't great, these guys are pretty good objective runners with a decent speed on the drumbot. As Rob Shepard pointed out on a recent video, if your drummer and drumbot both walk up to an objective and the drummer presses the button, the drumbot also gets a shot as well. So you're rolling whip 12 on the drummer and then whip 11 on the drumbot as well, which is really fantastic odds and is, somewhat akin to that mission bonus where you get to roll 2. That makes these guys pretty reliable, and the drummer itself with the marksman rifle on BS-13 isn't totally useless. The heavy flamethrower is pretty nice actually in N5, where templates have been reduced a bit, and you can still get a fork with the flash pulse or leave it as a defensive corner guard or flasher. So even though the Drumbot isn't a primary gunfighter for the Drumbot 5 like it is with the other profiles, it still has quite a lot of value, and it's extremely cheap. It's very, very cheap at 21 points. If your Drumbot can go around a corner, if you can press a button, if your Drumbot can go around a corner, heavy flame something and die, and you still got that drummer left over, that's a really good use of points. The drummers are pretty fantastic, and also kind of aid in that good order generation, protecting your points, where your primary gunfighter, being the Drumbot, if he dies, he's not the one losing you the order, so that's quite nice. Trauma docs, they don't link with anything, so they don't really have any value. Machinists are the same. You've also got much better engineers in the faction, so there's not much value there either. The Tech Bee has changed a lot and is pretty interesting, where it has Tag Com. So if you take a tag and take the Tech Bee, the Tag Com bonus listed in these brackets is given to your tag, sort of like the Rem Driver. A lot of them are the same, being the Dodge +3 and Gizmo Kit +1. You're already pretty good at Gizmo Kitting in Pano, so the bonus is nice, and tags generally have a dodge around 11 or 12, so bumping it up to 15 is pretty good as well. They've got the Deactivator, which is relevant for reactivating Disco Ballers. Gizmo Kit's nice, Specialist Operative's nice, and a Deployable Repeater is interesting, but if you get the Tech Bee killed, your tag loses its Tag Com. 9 points is incredibly cheap though, so I think this is a good one to keep in the back pocket. In KCF, it's probably a buff that the Tech Bee's been changed this way, so quite a good piece. Next we've got the minescorp jackals, which are really, really cool. And you've got two variants, being the FTO, who are going to link with your magistrates and become regular, and your infiltrators, who have separate profiles and are probably going to stay lone piece irregulars. Submachine gun Panzerfaust and boarding pistol, 6 points, or light rocket launcher boarding pistol. The boarding pistol is a new piece of gear. It's a damage 13 pistol, but additionally, it has a direct teardrop template, similar to the old boarding shotguns. So they're actually quite good template defense in your deployment zone. As to which one is better, they've both got their uses. With BS-11, you're not really looking to get in gunfights, and they're more so probably decent looking at short angles for attackers. The light rocket launcher has value there, and I think if you're trying to pick up kills with a Panzerfaust, they may be looking too deep and exposing themselves too much. So I think the light rocket launcher might be the way to go. They've also got booty as well. If they pick up something like MIM-6 or a heavy machine gun, maybe then they can do something more substantial. But I quite like the light rocket launcher option. Then with the infiltration profiles, I think the boarding shotgun EM carbine shock mines is quite good. But I think the real breadwinner is this mine layer. With the EM grenade launcher, shock mines and boarding shotgun. I could see you taking 2 of these and coordinated ordering EM grenades. Whether that'll be more of a meme or actually useful remains to be seen. You'll be spec firing those on 5, so it's not great. But you've got the boarding shotgun, which gives them a decent ballistics if they come around a corner on someone. And they've got that boarding pistol for the template, which means someone will be pretty uncomfortable just walking up to them around the corner. And that mine laying is fantastic and is a key part of that ablative defense Kestrel has open to it. Also being incredibly cheap at 11 points, I can imagine taking a magistrate and 2 6-point jackals, and then taking 2 mine layers. You've got an incredible amount of orders for not very much at all, especially if you take the Strategos Lieutenant, that can really power the rest of your list. But on the flip side, that's 5 slots, and if you want to take some, let's say 3 Fennec Fusiliers for utility and a couple guns, you've only got 5 slots left after that, and that's where some of the list building challenges in KCF can emerge, where you really feel that stress on your slots. Next up, from Starco, Emily Hadelman. Emily hasn't changed an incredible amount from what I've seen. She's still got her .5 SWIC, chain of command, grenade launcher, EM grenade launcher profile. You do have some good active lieutenants, and lieutenants you might want chain of command for. Unfortunately, I don't think Emily is your pick for that. You've got another chain of command in the faction that is much higher quality and has much more impact to links, the way links are set up now. She doesn't have any keywords, so she's not going to give any purity. 28 points, it's higher than your other option as well, and the SWIC's a bit of a Debbie Downer. Yeah, look, it's a bit of a shame, but I don't think Emily's really worth taking. You've got Nauf as well, who's changed a little bit in that he's got a decoy. I don't think it's a very useful decoy. You can use it to bluff an ARO, but Nauf probably isn't someone you want to put up an ARO, only being burst 1. He's still pretty decent as a gunfighter with MSV1 and a +1 burst multi-sniper rifle, but I think he gets outclassed pretty heavily by a lot of the other guns you have available to you. Nauf was kind of more of a pick in vanilla factions that needed a higher standard of gunfighting, or in Starco where he was linkable. It's a bit of a shame he's not linkable anymore, than he might have had a bit more of a niche, but currently I don't think he's really worth taking. Alright, Bapandra has had a bit of a glow up. She's still a Whip 13 Doctor, but now has reroll -3. So your chances of picking someone up are actually quite high. You've also got a medkit +1 burst, which is really useful due to the medkit and burst interaction with link teams I described earlier. And you've also got this tactical awareness profile. With tactical awareness, with strategos, with making irregular orders regular, and the linkable Pathfinder drone bot, it can sort of add to the proliferation of quite a lot of orders. She is pretty expensive, but that's the cost of a decent doctor in Pano. It'll remain, and she's, with the Fennec keyword, she is sort of struggling to edge out some of your other utility Fennecs, which she might struggle to do. I think the Kestrel tag is where she might see a little bit more success, but it'll sort of just have to be seen. I think if you're going to see anything, you're going to see the TAC-aware profile. I think at 2 points less, the other Doctor profile just isn't that attractive, and you really would want to bump it up to the TAC-aware. And the TAC-aware, I think, gives her more of a niche where you're more willing to take her. I could still absolutely understand if she ends up being too expensive or not really fitting right, but I think she's had really good changes that could make her viable, and she is worth experimenting with. As is Fusilier Indigo Richard Quinn. Quinn has picked up a few bits that's made him really nice. He's kept MSV1 and Forward Observer, which is great, but now he has Immunity Arm, which it's a new take on Total Immunity, where they split it into Immunity Arm and BTS. If you've got Immunity Arm, you're immune to any ammo types affecting your armor stat, like Explosive or AP, which is pretty nice. And he's also got Warhorse, which is the new Veteran, as well as the previous Veteran bonuses. It also lets you ignore the penalty from BS attack -3, where there's a bit of that floating around in the game now, so that's pretty decent for old Richie. He's upgraded his marksman to a multi-marksman now, which is a pretty big change, and he also has the Fennec keyword, so I can see you taking him as a pretty good backup gunfighter, where you can bump him up to potentially BS 14. He's got MSV, he's got a decent gun. Whether that's enough to sort of muscle out a backup gun like the Fennec Thunderbolt, I'm not really sure. They do different things. With the Thunderbolt, you're getting that added utility of the mine layer, and it costs half the points, but Fusilier Indigo Richard Quinn is clearly the better gunfighter. I'd sometimes take him in Varuna when I ran out of Swick. I think he's a lot better than he was, and I like what's changed about him. I'm just not sure if he's going to be able to, I guess sort of similar to Bipatra, I'm not sure if he's going to be able to push out those cheaper utility slots in your Fennec teams. And unlike Bipatra, I don't think he fits that well into the Kestrel keyword, where I think Bipatra fits a lot better. Alright, Dr. Harper Archaeo Raider is a new piece based off a Lara Croft Tomb Raider, which is pretty cool. She's got a nano screen, which is changed in N5, where before it gave you a cover bonus. Now it sort of separates its mods from cover to where it just gives your opponent a -3 to hit you, and you a +3 to any saves. Importantly, it is ignored by marksmanship now. So a bit of a buff, bit of a nerf. She's got an X-Visor, which is meh. With that ballistic skill, she probably shouldn't be using it unless it's in someone's back. Booty is decent. Dodge +3, also pretty meh. It's nice with her no wound incapacitation, where she can do an okay dodge, maybe knock off some saves, and then take a hit. Immunity shock, no cover. So no cover just means she doesn't get your opponent doesn't get a negative to the ballistic skill, shooting her in cover, and she doesn't get any armor bonus, but you are getting equivalent bonuses from the nano screen. So it's not as bad as it looks. Specialist operative, which is nice to have, and then that beautiful tactical awareness, which you're starting to see a decent bit of. She's got an FTO profile, which is, I think, probably the only one worth taking, with a plasma carbine, which is quite a good gun with a DA impact template, nanopulsar, EM mine, and viral pistol +1 burst. She's also giving you +1 Swick, which is the big draw for Harper. If you take Harper, get that +1 Swick, that's paying the Swick for your infiltrating jackals mine layer or a Peacemaker mine layer, giving you that bit of flexibility with your Swick. Most Pano sectorials are fairly Swick hungry, except for maybe military orders, where you just don't have the points to fit the Swick. But there's a lot of good uses for little sprinklings of extra Swick around in the faction, like an Evo hacker or those mine layers. So I do think it's quite nice, especially, we've seen this a bit in the past, but always tied to lieutenants. So this is something a bit different. She is pretty expensive at 32 points, but she does other stuff. BS12 isn't a completely fatal ballistic skill, especially with no wounding cap. And she can put down a mine, she's got a template, she's got tack aware. I like her quite a bit. Whether or not she'll turn out to be the bee's knees or not, I'm not too sure, but I think she's definitely got some legs. Oh, and I should say, don't take the forward deployment profile. You're just going to get stabbed before she can really do anything if you're going second. So I don't like this forward deployment profile at all. War cores have stayed the same. I love war cores. Alright, next up, Banshees. So these are your airborne units. You've got BS12, Phys12, Whip 13, which is a pretty nice stat line. So if you take an Evo hacker, you're jumping down on a 15, which is something you might be willing to take the risk on. It's got a multispectral visor level 2, combat jump, parachutist, and super jump jet propulsion. Super jump has changed now that jump is standardized to 6 inches. And a model with super jump can first short skill jump, second short skill jump. That means realistically, the Banshee is more like move 6-6. So while jumping on a 15, it's good but not great. If you mess up the drop, you're still moving 6-6, which is fast enough to get back in the fight and do something and still grab an objective. Looking at the profiles, you've got 2 non-specialist profiles, which they're okay. The Wild Parrot's pretty funny, and having the light shotgun and the Pulsar is good, especially with a decent ballistic skill, but I'm much more drawn to the specialist profiles where she can really get something done if she misses that drop. I mean, if you just want a backline mauler, there are other pieces to take. So I think the specialist profiles are really where you want to be, especially with such speed. And hacking bonuses tend to be pretty popular in ITS scenarios. I would be leaning more towards the killer hacking profile. Having Cyber Mask is really nice, because you can still super jump while Cyber Mask does its short movement skill without revealing yourself. And you're much less vulnerable to getting killer hacked like you would be with the regular hacking device. And the Swix sort of, you've got better hackers. So I'm really drawn to the Banshee killer hacker. And at 23 points, I think it's a pretty small cost for what you're getting as well. And we talked a bit about, with the Blink team, all of your hidden models are sort of floating around the low to high 20s. So having a Banshee, it's also good for bluffing something else, like a Blink team, or something we'll see a bit later, the Black Air, and putting that cognitive load on your opponents. Really like the Banshee. It's a fantastic piece. Alright, back to some linkable models. We've got the Fireflies Clandestine Demo Squad. These guys are BS13, Whip 13, Arm 2, which is really nice. They've got Albedo -6. Albedo's changed in N5, where it works as mimetism for marksmanship and for visors, and just applies the negative modifier in the brackets. So if something with a visor is shooting at the Fireflies, they're starting at a -6, which is really nice. They've got BS attack -1 SR across the board, which is quite nice. They've got some pretty good weapons for it as well. Shock immune, NCO, which is, nice. You have one model which gives you extra lieutenant orders, but it's probably going to want to use it on itself. Otherwise, the magistrate's pretty nice in terms of a lieutenant. So the NCO, it's nice. You are paying for it. It's whatever. And stealth, which is cool. These guys can duo, which is pretty attractive, especially with that albedo skill. You've got a heavy rocket launcher, an assault pistol for 1.5 SWIC and 24 points. I think this is a fantastic gun to include just as an albedo piece. Multispectral visors are usually quite popular as ARO pieces to suppress smoke and that sort of thing. And this is a pretty good mechanism for punishing that if your opponent doesn't think too hard about who they're coming up against. Then you've got a really nice suite of utility and specialist profiles, all having submachine guns and Panzerfausts, except for the Firefly Paramedic. You've got the Chain of Command, which I was mentioning before when I was talking about Emily. At 23 points and no SWIC, I think if you want a Chain of Command, this is the one for you. And it's really pretty simple just to staple to a Firefly heavy rocket launcher and have those guys running around together. The Engineer Deactivator is pretty nice. If you're taking drummers in your list, having the Engineer is pretty sweet, as is the Deactivator for reactivating Disco Ballers. There's a Mine Layer, who does have AP mines, but more excitingly has an armed turret with a marksman rifle. So the armed turrets are total reaction turrets, similar to the combi turrets we've seen in ITS scenarios previously. This one's a marksman rifle, which adds a bit more special sauce, as it's mine laid at the start of the game. You can watch a pretty good tight angle. It's not a specialist, which does drag it down a bit in terms of just trying to duo a heavy rocket launcher and a different Firefly. But, there's already been some pretty funny sort of Firefly mine layer spam lists, which is pretty hilarious. And then you've got the Paramedic, who's fine. It's whatever. The combi rifle overlaps a bit better with the heavy rocket launcher range bands compared to the submachine gun. How much that's going to matter, not really too sure. Then you've got a hacker with hacking device. They've got BTS 6, which is decent. And yeah, it's a pretty okay hacker. As we said before, hackers tend to be favored in terms of mission bonuses. There's a few paramedic bonuses we've seen as well, so these two are more the ones you're wanting if you just really do want that dedicated specialist. But I think stapling 2 Fireflies together to get that burst bonus is really nice with that heavy rocket launcher and a utility piece of your choice. Okay, next up, the Black Air. BS-13 Multispectral Visor Level 2 Combat Instinct, which is the new separated 6th sense, where Combat Instinct lets you ignore surprise attack. Mimetism -3, and that's a really good package. MSV2, Mimetism -3, BS-13, fantastic package. Combat Instinct's the cherry on top. And you've got a few different profiles that are all pretty decent, and all add a little special something. I'll start off talking about the FTO Neurocynetics profile with the multi-sniper rifle. This one's going to be your capstone for a lot of Fennec fire teams, from what I predict. And are going to kind of be, a pretty strong, almost N4 style aero piece. You're going to be burst. I get 2.5 is what I like to say with the special die with the Neurocynetics, with MIM and MSV really strong. You should note, MSV's had a bit of a nerf just due to albedo being something more in the game, and with 6th sense being harder to come by, getting white noise shot is more likely to affect you, but it's still a fantastic piece. Nothing's going to want to take this on in a fair fight. It's usually going to put bad mods on your opponent. I like it quite a bit, even though it is a little on the expensive side for a 1 wound model, and doesn't have shock immune or anything like that. But it's quite a strong piece. I think you're going to see it a lot, especially at the start of N5 as everyone's still adjusting. But yeah, I do think it is quite strong. And at the end of the day, some factions don't have tools like white noise, and some factions don't have tools like albedo, or just might not have albedo in the list. So I wouldn't be scared necessarily about putting this up. It's a fantastic piece. You got the Black Air Parachutist Deployment Zone up next, who's a hacker with a killer hacking device, 0 SWIC. It has a submachine gun and a flash pulse +1 burst. Submachine guns have gotten a little worse, being no longer AP, unless they're an AP submachine gun. But BS-13 burst 3, that's still good to shoot people in the back with. The flash pulse +1 burst is also pretty nice. I could see a scenario where you walk this guy on in your opponent's deployment zone, flash pulse something in the back of the head that's causing you problems in a gunfight, and then sticking up a primary gunfighter to hose it down. I think there's some pretty good potential there. Also, the killer hacking device, a lot of times very hacking strong armies will have quite a good repeater net in the midfield, where they want you to come into that net and fight them where they have that firewall, but you can really punch up in terms of the hacking game by appearing in their deployment zone and zapping them in their own turf. I think that's going to be quite strong. And if someone's not ready for the Black Air deployment zone, I think it's going to be pretty brutal. You've got these other FTO profiles. Not a big fan of the hacker FTO. I think it's just better use. You've got better hackers and better uses for the SWIC in the slot. The Forward Observer K1 Marksman Rifle is pretty interesting. You do have some decent armor busting options, but not a ton. So I do like the K1 Marksman quite a bit, especially with the mods he's got going on there. There's not much he's not going to be able to hit with that. Being a Forward Observer is nice, but not huge. Nanopulsar's okay. You're on the 1 wound model. You're probably not wanting to use that. You're probably not wanting to use that too much. But I think the K1 Marksman Rifle has some potential. It is costing you half a SWIC, so I could see this one sort of getting pushed out at 30 points and half a SWIC for being too expensive. But I think it has some potential. Whether or not it's going to be enough, I'm not sure. But I'd completely understand if the Black Air K1 sort of ends up being a piece that's too strange or doesn't fit in well enough, or doesn't do the job as well as other models can, or as well as other models at a cheaper price point. I think it's worth experimenting with, though. Now, as for Fenza, he's had a big rework where he's got Dogged, Immunity, Arm, Combat Instinct, and finally BS-13. He's got his FTO profile with an adhesive launcher rifle plus 1 burst. So the adhesive launcher rifle, it's quite similar to the old adhesive launcher, except it has an additional burst. Another burst on top of that means it's a burst 3 adhesive launcher, which is pretty decent. Heavy pistol plus 1 burst is nice, as is a viral rifle. He's got hollow mask, so he can pretend to be someone he's not. But with a lack of keywords, I'm not really sure how he's going to fit in. I think he's probably still just a bit too expensive. I mean, the Dogged's nice, but I don't know. I think he got better things to do with your points. I wouldn't be surprised if he snuck in a list or two, but I also wouldn't be surprised at all if he never saw the table. Next, we've got Optimate Agent Maximus. So this is Little Maximus, not Big Tag Maximus. Although he's pretty similar to his pilot profile. He's got a Thunderbolt plus 2 bursts, so burst 4, EM Carbine, Heavy Pistol, some good CC weapons for a SWIC and 40 points. Specialist Operative, and then a whole soup of different stuff. No wounding cap and being good in CC is sort of key among them. He's a wild card, so he can go wherever he wants. Oh no, he's not a wild card, sorry. He just fits in the Fennec's team. But I don't think the Fennec team wants him, unfortunately. I don't think BS-12 is good enough for a 40-point model if you want it to be a gunfighter. I think a SWIC is pretty heavy-handed for a Thunderbolt plus 2 burst when the Fennec has a Thunderbolt plus 1 burst. You've got a bit more survivability. Armor 3 is actually pretty nice, but I don't know, no wounding cap, Armor 3, it's fine. He's got a movement that wants him to push up, but your core probably doesn't want to follow you. You can get him up to BS-13 with some list building, but I don't think it's really going to be worth it that much. I think Maximus is probably the biggest stinker in terms of linkable models, and I wouldn't touch this guy at all. Now a completely different story, the Hetari shooters. These are a heavy infantry with move 6-2, BS-14, Phys-14, Whip 12, Arm 5, BTS 6 with 2 wounds. Already a fantastic stat line, but it gets better. BS attack -3, which the -3 is inflicted on your opponent. Combat instinct, which we discussed earlier, and marksmanship. So realistically, let's say that the Hetari is going up against a ballistic skill 13 model. The Hetari is probably on 17s for ignoring its cover, and the BS attack -3 will be putting them down to a 10, which is a pretty wide divide. They are pretty expensive, but look, they're absolutely worth it. You've got the multi-Red Fury and the Emerat, which is really nice. I think the Red Fury is a weapon that's overly hated on, but having the multi for the AP ammo there is really nice, where the Red Fury natively carries shock anyway. But you're going to be using that AP, you're going to be bursting down targets, having such a high BS and lowering your opponent's BS, that's going to mean you're going to get a lot of shots through. As sort of a black sheep option, you've got the missile launcher AP submachine gun, which would really want to be in a Kestrel Fireteam. I could see you maybe doing Firefly, missile launcher, or maybe by Panzer a Firefly missile launcher. You're only ever getting it up to burst 2, but you're at such a good ballistic skill, I could see you using it on the active turn reasonably well, and if you're sticking this up in a black arrow on ARO, that's probably pretty tough to get by. I do think the multi-Red Fury is the much safer pick, but don't discount the missile launcher. I think it's actually got some decent potential in it. And here you can see is an AP submachine gun, where you can kind of see that submachine gun change coming through. But yeah, look, it's a fantastic piece. the lieutenant profiles are great if you're taking, say, the chain of command Firefly, and you can run the Hetari lieutenant as a solo piece, which it's very equipped to do, just running and gunning. I've had a few people say it might be the best gunfighter in the game, and from what I've seen on the table, that's kind of shaping up to be true. I quite like the Hetari. I can foresee it being in quite a lot of KCF lists in one form or another, whether you're taking the LT or not, or the missile launcher. I think most lists are going to have a Hetari in it. Next is the Griffin, who is tagged with the Fennec keyword, which is quite nice. They've got MSV1, an Orc stat line, and then they've got jump 8 inches and a few different profiles. You've got a multi-rifle pulsar, which I don't think you're ever going to see. You've got a heavy machine gun pulsar, which is a really nice active turn gunfighter. And then the Feuerbach pulsar, which is a really good mixed unit. You've also got a lieutenant heavy machine gun profile, which you could take. You get a bit of a SWIC discount. I think for the role of a solo gunfighting lieutenant, you'd probably rather just take the Hetari. And in a link, you're sort of losing the benefit of that lieutenant order. But if you're taking Fireflies, they're happy to use it. Importantly, they've got the Fennec keyword. And I'm seeing a lot of excitement about the Black Air as an ARO piece. But I think the Feuerbach is quite attractive as well. You've got that MSV1, so you can still see through smoke and some mimetism. If you take, say, 4 Fennecs and a Griffin, you're getting quite a lot of special sauce on top. You're up to BS 15, which is pretty rough stuff, and dodging on a 13. Additionally, you're discovering pretty decently with an MSV1 and +3 to your whip. So I actually don't mind the Feuerbach as an ARO piece. You've got a lot more survivability than the Black Air as well, with Arm 4 and 2 Vitality, especially if you stick the Paramedic or Bipandra in this link. And then the Neurokinetic Sniper, he's pretty one note, but the Griffin Feuerbach can absolutely fire back and make some noise in the active turn. I think, the Black Air is the big flashy piece, and people might be sleeping on the Griffin Feuerbach profile especially. The heavy machine gun, it's quite a solid gun, being at quite a good range. I could see it sort of getting edged out by the Hetari as well, especially now that you have ways to control line of sight. The big issue historically with Pano is that you needed to be taking primarily long-range guns because you didn't have anything like a disco baller. Now that you have a disco baller, there's a lot more license just to take things like Hetkaris, who you can guarantee pretty easily to get up to a decent range with a disco baller. So I don't know, I think the heavy machine gun little further down on the pecking order. Look, still absolutely solid. But the Feuerbach, I think people are sleeping on. Heavy machine gun's still good. I wouldn't really bother with this multi-rifle. You could duo 2 Griffins together, like a Griffin multi-rifle and a Griffin Feuerbach or heavy machine gun, but I think you're probably better off just taking a Firefly as that duoable piece, or even Bipandra to get that tactical awareness. Alright, and here's an absolute flashbanging wall of text of a profile. It's the Team Crux Father Knights. I assure you, though, that the reading is absolutely worth it. These guys are monsters. Move 6-2, CC 22, BS 12, Phys 14, Whip 13, Arm 6, BTS 6, and 2 wounds. And they're a wild card as well, so they can fit into any of this stuff. Albedo -6 is fantastic. Berserk is fantastic. Berserk has changed to be face-to-face now, but with Martial Arts Level 2 and Natural Born Warrior and that CC stat, I don't think the Father Knight really cares that much and could actually lead to it avoiding a few wounds. BS attack +1 SD, which is special die, and that's the language CB is using around that extra die for being in a fire team. Shock immune's nice. Specialist operative's really nice. It means you can put it in links with stuff that doesn't need, you don't need to bring that other specialist. You could put it with like 2 Fireflies that have, the mine layer turrets, because you don't need that specialist. I mean, that's a pretty memey example, but there is value there. And stealth. You've got these weird forward deployment profiles, which I would largely ignore. But then you've got these 3 FTO profiles, which are really good, particularly the multi-marksman rifle PS5, which is essentially damage 15 in N4. So they've got one more thing to mention with BS attack +1 special die, is that that's applied in reactive as well. So pop him on suppressive or put him around a corner, he's shooting back more die than usual, and BS14 is quite a good shot. He's got the multi-marksman rifle, which means he's shooting back DA at you, as well as a multi-pistol. So as long as you're within that 24-inch band, you're not escaping decent saves if he hits you. Drop bears are really good. D-charges have changed a bit. If you use them in CC, now they give you a -6 to hit. But, depending on what you're hitting, you can still opt to slap those on. A damage 15 DACC weapon, and that multi-pistol. It's a really well-rounded amount of kit that complements itself really nicely. I quite like the drop bears, especially with such a high fizz. You can throw those out, then come around the corner and fork really well. This guy can engage you in so many different ways and probably be positive on it. And I think albedo -6 is the good number for albedo. If you're albedo -3ing a model with marksmanship, it's just sort of back down to flats. But the albedo -6 is really good, and it's quite a tough model as well. I would steer away from the Spitfire, mostly because you're paying 1.5 swig for an extra burst, but -1 damage and no AP. Especially where you've already got that +1 special die. I think the Crux Knight multi-marksman rifle is more than sufficient. It's cheaper points-wise and swig-wise, and I think it's the better choice. Then you've got the strategic deployment, which means anyone in its fire team gets to deploy 4 inches forward. I think for an extra 4 points, it's really worth it, especially if you're bringing mine layers or anything of the sort with him, and it just gets him that bit closer to starting the game in a really good position to start shooting. They are expensive, but I think they're absolutely fantastic. I may be colored a bit from military orders, where they're even more fantastic there than they are here. Here you might have some better options, but there's just so much going on here. And like I said at the start of the video, generally in Kestrel, your unit has a role, and it does that role, and that's sort of it. The Team Crux sort of shows you that different side where they can be doing quite a lot more, like getting objectives or setting up forks or some kind of defense with the drop bears. I quite like them. Yeah, I think they really stand out. Again, I'd be ignoring these forward deployment model profiles, especially because he's hackable heavy infantry. But man, this stat line is great. These abilities are fantastic. And this damage 15 multi-marksman rifle, wow. Alright, now on to the Tikbalang, who has had some minor changes. Well, sorry, I shouldn't say minor. Has had some decent changes. The biggest one is to the way Climbing Plus works. Before, you could use Climbing Plus as part of any standard movement, short movement skill. But now it's been changed to where you have to declare the climb skill. And Climbing Plus just converts the climb skill into a short skill. So his mobility has been reduced pretty heavily, which is pretty unfortunate. You've kept the shock mines from the shock army Tikbalang, and other than that, all you've got in you is this Lieutenant +1 order Tikbalang. With tack aware, that means if you bring the Lieutenant Tikbalang, it's got 4 orders just to spend on itself. I'm quite fond of the Group 2 tag, with some, shit kickers and engineering supports. So if you put it in that smaller 5-order group, it's bringing that up to 8 orders just on its own, which is pretty beastly. The Tick's BS-15, min -3, and is just very adept at winning gunfights. The damage 16 regular heavy machine gun, not having AP does matter, especially shooting at other main battle tags. Against light tags and just regular heavy infantry, you'll be able to wear them down eventually, especially if you're taking the extra orders. You're not carrying an incredible amount of it's taking you a bit more time. But these guys win gunfights fantastically. They're quite resilient. S6 being a small silhouette is also good for them. Oh, additionally, climbing is changed to where you no longer measure from the top. Oh, and it's the same for super jump. From the top of your silhouette, you're back to measuring from the bottom of your silhouette. Just a quick note. But look, dodge phase 11, it's not great. But if you take the Tech B that's dodging on a 14, that's actually quite good. And being gizmo kitted on a 14 is quite good as well if you take that Tech B. Instead of having a pilot pop out of it, all tags can now deploy an ancillary remote, which is just a little remote that runs around and can do objectives for you similar to the old pilots, except you're not exposing yourself as much like you were with the old pilots. The Tikbalang is still quite good. It has been nerfed with the Climbing Plus. I'm really drawn to the Lieutenant +1 order profile, especially where we've got pretty easy chain of command. And yeah, look, it's still a pretty fantastic tag. Next up, the Squalos Mark II, another light tag with Arm 6, BTS 6, and a smaller silhouette. Its stat line is pretty similar to the Tikbalang, except that it has combat instinct, and yeah, an extra point of dodge, an extra inch for dodge, which might actually come up if you take the Tech B. Because of that big silhouette, you're able to tuck yourself back somewhere easier. You've got 3 different profiles. The multi-marksman rifle, multi-pistol +1 burst, the heavy machine gun grenade launcher, multi-pistol, and the multi-heavy machine gun. These are all really cool profiles that I do think each have a place. The multi-marksman rifle is really interesting as a medium-range gun, and I think if you do want to try and take a pure duo Fireteam, you should probably give it a shot with the multi-HMG and the multi-marksman. I think it's an interesting unit just to have available. How viable it is sort of meh, but look, you're a great gunfighter. The multi-pistols put you in a pretty good spot up close, and you can do specialist missions as well, which is good. The heavy machine gun grenade launcher, this is probably my least favorite profile. The +1 damage grenade launcher is quite good, especially where it's a template weapon, and you're spec firing on 9s a lot of the time, which is pretty attractive. But just having that regular heavy machine gun, you run into the same issues we talked about with the Tikbalang. It is a decent bit cheaper than the Tikbalang though, and the grenade launcher is pretty nice, so you're still going to see this one on the table a decent bit. And then you've got all reliable multi-heavy machine gun, multi-pistol, NCO, the pretty classic Squalos loadout, minus that grenade launcher, of course. I really like it. And yeah, look, the Squalos, they're just very dependable, reliable pieces. They're pretty cheap in terms of cost as well. You can chuck a Firefly in there, be it, chain of command or engineer. A bulleteer in there can add a repeater, or you can try and go for that pure duo as a bit of a laugh. But yeah, no, the Squalos is quite a good piece. No bells and whistles, just Pan-Oceanian excellence. Ugh. And then there's Maximus. So we had a look at the little Maximus. This is Big Maximus. He's up to BS-14, which is quite good. And he's sort of kept that CC prowess. He's got a decent dodge. Additionally, if you take the Tech B, he's going to be dodging on a 15, which is pretty nice. He's got the new escape system. So the transmutation escape system, I should say, where when you get to the number of wounds taken listed in the escape system, in this case being 3, you retain those wounds, and then you sort of retain those wounds, and then the operator pops out. So you'll see he's got strength 4. So if he takes 3 wounds, it puts down an Eclipse template, which is a great change. And then Operator Maximus comes out with 1 wound left. Operator Maximus is a bit crap. I don't like Big Maximus either, because he can't pop out a specialist. But having a look at his weapons, he's got a Thunderbolt +2 burst, which is essentially a heavy machine gun with Feuerbach range bands, due to that BS attack -1 SR, an EM carbine, a heavy pistol, and an AP plus DA close combat weapon. The one nice thing about Max is that he's never going to be caught out no matter what range he's in. Total immunity does make him pretty tough as well. I just don't think he's going to have enough of an impact on the table. I don't see that Thunderbolt really doing enough damage. The EM carbine's pretty nice, but it's only burst 2, same with the heavy pistol. And, I mean, if he's your close assault, you've probably got better things to be assaulting with, and him being hackable is a pretty big problem. I think Maximus has a lot going for him, but it's not enough to counteract how janky escape system is, him not being able to be a specialist, his weapons not being impactful enough, and him having a weird role where he's going to have a tough time pushing through repeater nets and things like that, and being quite expensive. Maximus is the most expensive tag you have available. I mean, the low swit cost is something, but for 3 less points you can take that Tikbalang Lieutenant, or for a decent bit less than that you can take the Squalos. So I think there's just a big opportunity cost to taking Big Maximus as well, which is a bit of a shame. Alright, the Pathfinder drone bot, same as last edition, except most sensor bots have now picked up attack awareness profile, which is really nice with the being a wild card. You could slot into a pretty nice Harris with those 2 Fireflies, just adding attack aware, or you could take one of the Fireflies who's got utility in that mine layer but not a specialist, and then have the Pathfinder be your specialist. Repeater's nice. Deactivator is more relevant with the Disco Baller, and that attack awareness for 17 points I think is really solid. It's going to be interesting to find places to slot him in. You can also strap it to one of your tags, which I think is another really good use for it, to drag around a specialist and a repeater. You can't strap it with Maximus, which could have solved some of his problems. I still don't think he would be good. But yeah, strap it to a tag. I think it's quite good in the Kestrel teams. And those are 2 really good spots for it. I don't think it muscles into the Fennec or the Colcorp team, but I think it's a really good piece. Sierra drone bots, so all TR bots pick up a Thunderbolt +1 burst version for 0 swick, which is nice. Again, you might want to take an Evo hacker, might not. This might be a kind of push in the Evo hacker direction, but I think you got better things to do on ARO. I do think standalone ARO pieces are going to be more popular. One thing I should have mentioned before with the Black Air is that you can absolutely take that Neurocynetics profile as a solo piece to leave more room in that team. You're just losing 1 burst, which isn't nothing, but already being burst 2 is pretty nice. The Clipper has a non-guided +1 burst option. It's not linkable, so you don't care. AVA-1 Fugazi, while this is backbreaking for some factions, MO, you don't really care at all. You've got jackals, you've got great order generation, you've got a ton attack aware. Who cares? Bulleteers have changed a bit. With the shotgun changes, they picked up a heavy shotgun +1 burst, which is really nice. There's not much that's going to take a great face-to-face against a bulleteer if the bulleteer's in its good range. Any hacker being able to yank around a repeater as well is really nice. The Spitfire has historically been good. I don't think it has the link options in faction to see its full potential like maybe in military orders. It's an okay piece. Sorry, no, it's a good piece with not great link options, so I don't think you'll see it a bunch. Peacemakers have had a huge glow up. They've kept their heavy shotguns and have now got pulsars to make up for the fact that they lost it. Mimetism -3 is also really nice. So as long as they're not running into a template, they're going to be pretty hot. They do have BS attack +1 burst profiles as well, but you lose out on the Ox bot with one of those. I think it is quite good, especially because that +1 burst gets applied to your pulsar as well. Burst 2 templates are relatively uncommon in N5 compared to an N4, so that's really nice to have. The Ox bot is also still fantastic, having the heavy flamethrower, and now shock mines, which is really cool. But the star of the show is the Peacemaker with the Oxbot 3B, who has Mine Layer. It's pretty significant that the Oxbot itself has Mine Layer instead of the Peacemaker. What you can do is you can put down the Peacemaker, put the Oxbot 8 inches away, and then the mine 8 inches away from that, and have a really good spread across that forward deployment plus 8 inches line. If you take a jackal or two as well, that's suddenly making something that's really hard to push through. I can see you taking 2 of these with the AVA2, especially if you've got some hacking support to make use of that repeater as well. I think they're quite good, and the mine layer is one you should really pay attention to. While you can do that sort of spread defense, you can also do a really nice layering defense, where you've got mine, Oxbot, and then Peacemaker that someone has to get through to a critical run on your deployment zone, or maybe a critical objective like in Supremacy, the objectives there where they have to be in your side of the table. I think it's really something to watch, really something to make good use of. You've also got a good engineer in the Firefly who can pick them up if they get knocked down as well, or pick up the support bots, which is really great. Power bots are the same, mule bots are the same, except baggage has changed. Baggage now says that at the start of the states phase, any models within 8 inches of the mule bot are automatically restocked. And that includes things like the turrets, which is pretty cool, and Panzerfausts for your jackals and things like that. So I think you'll see taking one baggage bot in a list pretty commonly with those changes. And if you take the Evo hacker, you've got that baggage in there as well. So there are decent reasons to take an Evo hacker. One among them is the baggage bonus as well. Now to the Skirmishers, we have the Scarecrow's active recon group, who are fairly similar to Crocmen. So they've got BS-13, their camouflage, hidden deployment, infiltration, MIM-6, and stealth, with surprise attack and terrain total. And they've got a few different profiles. The ones I'd be paying attention to are probably the Killer Hacker and the Forward Observer profiles. Having BS-13 is really nice for a model in this role, especially with MIM-6. Unfortunately, they don't really have a gun to make use of it. The Silenced Pistol is a new weapon, which gives models being shot at outside of line of sight a -6 to respond, and it's a DA weapon as well. So if you can sneak into an opponent's back line with that BS-13, even though it is only 2 shots, it can take things out pretty handily. The mine layer I'd probably steer away from, just because it's a lot of points for a mine layer. You've got other things to do that, like the Peacemaker and Jackal, that are a lot cheaper. The killer hacking device is nice, especially with surprise attack, where you can you can walk in some kind of repeater and surprise attack through that repeater. The forward observer is also nice if you just don't want to mess around with being hackable and that sort of thing, even though, again, it's mostly hacker bonuses. The Scarecrow forward observer is really nice. You can always pop out of Mim 6 to chuck out a quick flash pulse on the reactive turn as well. Should be noted, though, flash pulses have gone down from 2 saves to just 1 save, and that's the ammo type as a whole. Submachine gun's nice. Nano pulser's fine if you can drop it on someone outside of line of sight. But they're pretty cheap for a hidden deployment profile. We've seen hidden deployment sort of go down in costs. I don't think they're quite as good as a Trinitarian. I think they're pretty equivalent to a Crocman. Again, you had like the Crocman, who was a forward observer and had a deployable repeater to expand your network or go scalpel something out. So you are sort of seeing that Kestrel, you're built for a purpose, you do that purpose, that's it, sort of coming through again. But yeah, the Scarecrow's a really nice piece. It can gunfight okay when it comes down to it. It can press buttons with Whip 13 and a hacker bonus, and it bluffs those scarier models as well. So yeah, the Scarecrow is quite good, also a pretty beautiful sculpt. Alright, next is Dart. Dart hasn't changed much at all, really. I don't think much at all. Yeah, I don't think she's changed, period, to be honest. The main one you're looking at here is the submachine gun viral bow EM grenades. She's had a change in climbing plus being a lot worse. Dart was pretty nice in military orders in N4, where her tag busting abilities and hacker scalpeling was really valuable. The EM grenades are quite a nice include, where you could do something like run up to an opponent's deployment zone, spec fire an EM grenade on a tag, then walk around the corner, get it out of cover, and spray into it with an AP submachine gun. Just kind of lost that with the submachine gun on the AP. And yeah, I'm just not really sure what role you'd use her for in Kestrel. In terms of scalpeling hackers, you've got other models for that in your drop troops. And it's a lot of orders compared to your drop troops to try and run up Dart. Especially now that submachine guns lost AP, she's sort of lost that tag busting ability. You can still spec fire an EM grenade with a 50-50 chance to land, which is nice. But for 34 points, I think you probably got better things to be doing. The roller coaster of is Dart good? Forever. Beast Hunters haven't really changed much. I think they've gotten a little bit worse in CC, but they haven't changed at all past that. Yeah, they're solid. Nothing much to say about them. The Heavy Flamer +1 burst might have some added value now that templates have changed a bit. But yeah, no, they're fantastic. And then the Yamabushi. So the Yamabushi is... I describe them as a regular Beast Hunter. They're quicker than a Beast Hunter. They're quite a bit better in CC than a Beast Hunter. And they dodge better. They've got Dogged, which is absolutely huge if you've ever played against a Liberto. But only forward deployment +4. It is sort of measured out by that movement bonus, though, so that probably doesn't affect them too much. And you can bluff them as a mine and that sort of thing. Martial Arts level 3 is an important level of martial arts, where you're getting that special die to your martial arts. Mimetism -3 is nice, where you're not a model who has, no cover, not that you're really going to be using cover that much. You've got these FTO profiles, which I don't believe are linkable in Kestrel, but you don't really care about that. What you care about is these camouflage profiles, with the Chain Rifle Panzerfaust or Chain Rifle Tac Bow shock mines, and Heavy Pistol. I think you still want to take the Panzerfaust profile. If you want to tactical bow something, you're probably better off just shooting it in the back with the Heavy Pistol or running into CC with it. The Panzerfaust really gives you a decent threat, and you can bluff it as a mine or something like that as well. And they're also really close to the cost of a Beast Hunter. I could see you can make a pretty hellish meme list of 2 Peacemaker mine layers, 2 Jackal mine layers, Beast Hunter, and a 2 Yamabushi. That'd be pretty funny. But yeah, look, AVA2 is quite nice. Them being regular is quite nice, as they can participate in a lot of coordinated orders. That's something the Beast Hunter kind of struggled in, and the Jackals may struggle in with the grenade launchers, is that you can't always include everyone you want in those coordinated orders. But getting a lone gun piece, like say the Hetari Lieutenant, and then 2 Yamabushi, 2 coordinated and all shoot, against a arrow piece that's giving you a lot of trouble. Not that I know what that is if it's giving a Hetari trouble. That's a pretty nice option to have. I quite like the Yamabushi. Then the Red Eye Close Support Squad. This is the Pan-Oceanian vehicle. So vehicles, essentially, they can't enter base contact with things. So they can't control objectives, but they also can't be close combated. And that's the aerial trait you see there as the first special skill. They've got BS-13, 6 arm, 6 BTS, and 7 structure, which is quite good. Courage, whatever. Dodge -3, so when they dodge, they give your opponent -3. A good gizmo kit. They jump 8 inches, which is good to know because they have super jump 8 inches. So that means with each super jump you're making, you're moving 8 inches. So you can, first short skill, jump for 8, second short skill, jump another 8. That's really fast. No cover, which is not great, but you've got mimetism -6, which is usually putting pretty heavy debuffs on your opponent. You've got good albedo models as well to punish and get rid of visors early. And yeah, they're pretty decent. Where they fall down is their weapon choices. Spitfire, chain rifle, and either blitz nor grenade launcher. I don't know, it just doesn't really do a whole lot for me. I've had some success with the vehicles so far, where they're a very good turn 2 kind of sweep piece, once the herd's been thinned out a bit. And a Spitfire is enough to race by someone, get them out of cover, blast them in the back with it. And that chain rifle is really nice too, to really put the shove on those 1 wound models. Overall though, I think you've just got better things to spend your SWIC on. Maybe you take the grenade launcher with the grenade launcher Squalo to do some coordinated order silliness. But yeah, I don't really see the Red Eye being the bee's knees. Alright, so that's the end of the look at Kestrel. Overall, they look pretty incredibly strong. You're not really going to have to take any models that are dead weight, or any models that sort of don't do anything for you. Cheerleaders like the Fugazi, even though you've only got 1, you're not going to take them much at all when you've got really high utility in Fennec Fusiliers and in Jackals. They look pretty exciting in terms of a mix of Pano things you can do, and they seem to really excel at generating those orders. You're going to probably run into trouble regarding slots, but I think it's worth it for the quality of stuff you're getting. I've played against a few Kestrel units, not Kestrel as a faction yet, but from what I've seen of those individual units, they look really good and a really fun faction to play. Kestrel's, it's looking quite strong. I've seen that opinion, and that's an uncontroversial opinion. But yeah, they look really good, and they look to really have been made with the new Fireteam rules in mind. You can make a really great core out of the Fennecs, Griffins, and Black Air. Really good duos over here with the Kestrel teams. Great duos with the armored fire teams. And then great duos or Harrises with the magistrate jackal teams. And then you've got really high quality wild cards in the Crux, Pathfinder, Bapandra, and Dr. Harper. That I think are going to be pretty exciting to add to the mix. And I think it's going to be a fun faction as well. I've had a few people kind of say they couldn't really get on board with Pano just because of how straightforward and yet to some uninteresting, the play pattern that Pano has. But you've got so much utility, even in your line troops, and so many angles of attack with your different drop troops and hidden deployment options. And you've got, I think the serious list is going to be quite good, but I think there's also going to be pretty decent meme lists like turret spam, or going heavy into mine layers, or I don't know, the duoing the Squalos. So I think for a new Pano player, Kestrel looks really good. They've got a great defensive mix of hard and soft arrows as well. And there's going to be a lot of ways to build Kestrel, I think, that are going to be viable, which is a problem that some Pano factions have run into in the past, being sort of more mono build than others. Aside from something like the Hetari, which is, far and away probably your best gun, nothing stands out as an overpowering flavor, and where it does, that kind of leads to more excitement with things that could be slept on, like the Griffin and Black Air. I'm really excited for Kestrel to hit the table. They look like they're going to be a ton of fun. And look, hey, thanks again for watching the video. Feel free to comment anything I've missed. I love talking to you guys in the comments. And thanks again for tuning in. I'll catch you soon. Bye-bye.